So for some of you who really don't like to read and prefer more of a visual auditory type of retelling of the storylines, let me get into this really quickly to help you guys understand what you might be watching today on Monday Night Raw, or at least my assessment of it. So last night was Hell in a Cell, and a lot of things are probably going to be repeated. Some matches may be reshown or redone, all that good jazz. You know how WWE does. However, most importantly, Cody Rhodes is set to show up at Monday Night Raw tonight. He's supposed to be there to address the WWE Universe. But what would the prodigal son have to say after that amazing performance he had at Hell in a Cell? Given the fact that he had a torn pectoral muscle, visibly injured, and still was able to will out over the visionary Seth Rollins, one would have to ask, more importantly, what does Cody have to say? He shouldn't have to say anything, in my opinion, but what does he have to say, and how is he going to address his injury? Another key component of this Cody Rhodes story is still Seth Rollins. He's never been one to just lay down and take a loss, and he always has a way to respond. And given the fact that Cody has had 1 foot ahead of him and been one step ahead of him every single time they have competed against each other, it just seems to me like there's only a matter of time before Seth Rollins snaps. But the question you have to ask yourself is, how will the Visionary react to a third loss to Cody Rhodes? And what will Cody say when he addresses the WWE Universe? I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Moving on to the next storyline. Judgment Day is set to make their triumphant return to Monday Night Raw. And of course, they're going to brag and be braggadocious about winning over AJ Styles, Finn Balor, and Liv Morgan. It was a good pickup for them as a team, as a faction. This has solidified them in terms of what they stand for, which I have yet to understand. They claim they don't want to pander to the fans anymore, and that they're not the ones who move them, and that they're doing everything for themselves and, of course, for their omnipotent one, Edge. Now the question you have to ask yourself is, what's next on the agenda for the faction? Because every faction has a goal. Every faction has an end game. From the Shield to DX to the Four Horsemen to even the Bloodline, who is currently in power. There is always an end game. So is Edge going to be headed for the title? Is Rhea Ripley headed for the Women's Championship? And what's Damian Priest going to be doing? I guess we'll just have to wait and see when Judgment Day addresses the WWE Universe tonight. Moving on to the next bout. We all saw Bianca Belair successfully defended her Raw Women's Championship this past Sunday at Hell in a Cell. Now there is a match scheduled, a fatal four-way, to determine a number one contender to challenge for the Raw Women's Championship in the future. Those four competitors consist of Alexa Bliss, who's been on quite the roll lately with wins, or winning over Doudrop just recently, Sonya Deville, and several others. She hasn't lost a match since she's returned. And she's been pretty cool, calm, and collected. Nothing has rattled her cage as of lately. She still has that little doll Lily with her, so one can only imagine that it only takes a matter of time for her to switch that flip the switch. You see, I did that? Anyway, moving on to the next competitor, Doudrop, who just recently lost a match to Alexa Bliss, as I said, but she's also looking to get back in the game after she a failed attempt with Nikki to capture the women's tag team titles. And of course, Liv Morgan, who's coming off of a major loss at Hell in a Cell. I'm pretty sure this would be a major redeeming quality for her to go on and become the number one contender against the Raw Women's Champion, Bianca Belair. And finally, you have Rhea Ripley, who is on the other side of this loss of Liv Morgan's. She actually won her match against Liv Morgan at Hell in a Cell, so she's on quite the high and momentum going into this fatal four-way match. So the question is, who do you choose? Are you going to go after the one who has the most momentum, which would be Rhea Ripley? Are you going to go after the underdog, which more than likely would be considered to be Liv Morgan? Or are you going to have more of an unconventional approach? Are you going to go after Piper, aka Doudrop, who really, in my opinion, is the only one who needs to be built up here? And you could very well, of course, go after the 5-time women's champion and two-time women's tag team champion, Alexa Bliss. And we all know that she has had many bouts with the championship and can hold her own in a match against Bianca Belair. The question is, who's going to will out, who wants it more, and who's going to be a future contender against the Raw Women's Champion? We'll just have to wait and see. Moving on to another announcement. Miz and Co. have been a little quiet as of lately, but all that is all dead and done. Miz is always ready to shake up and tear up some shit. And of course, he's going to bring in his wife, Maurice, to add a little kerosene to the flames. Miz TV is set to host a segment this week tonight, and of course, these two will host the show together. You have to ask what's going to be the subject matter of this show, who's going to be on it. I know that their Miz and Mrs Show is coming back to television. I think it debuts this week. I'm not sure. But with all that being said, let's see what Miz is going to be doing and who he's going to irritate this week on Monday Night Raw. Moving into the possible storylines. The last time we saw Bobby Lashley, he was in the middle of the ring celebrating his win over MVP and Omos. Of course, Cedric Alexander had a big help in that. That may lead to some problems between Cedric, MVP, and Omos, of course. But Bobby Lashley won, and there's nothing that anybody can do about it. But he also had a little bit of a show after that match. He made it very clear that he was coming after that WWE Championship, to which right now the Tribal Chief Roman Reigns holds. So, the question has to be asked. How will the WWE Universal Champion, undisputed Universal Champion, respond to this challenge? He has two. One coming from Bobby Lashley and another one coming from Drew McIntyre over on SmackDown. But I would imagine the addressing would be towards Bobby first, seeing as how their show comes up first. So the question is, how or will the Tribal Chief respond to the pseudo challenge from a former two-time WWE champion, Bobby Lashley? Moving on to another possibility. Last night, we saw Titan Theory retain his United States Championship in Chicago at Hell in a Cell. Now, me personally, I can give less than two fucks about Austin Theory, okay? But apparently, a lot of people like him and want to see him thrive. I'm just not a big fan of a bitch-ass nigga, okay? But with all that being said, Ali did put on an amazing fight. It is possible that Ali could continue his feud with Austin Theory, but one would have to say at this point you've had two opportunities at the title despite them being completely one-sided on one time, and of course Austin Theory using everything in his arsenal another. It still would land that Austin would have to move on at some point. Now, Mustafa Ali probably could still be put on Titan Theory and win that championship at another date. However, I think that it is very possible that Austin could move on to a new opponent, i.e. possibly John Cena, dropping a little hint. And it also could be that Ali could be your next Money in the Bank winner. At least that's how I would do it if I was working for WWE. But we all know how WWE is. They listen to the fans only when they want to. And the ones who actually make sense, like myself and many others, they completely ignore until they want to jump in my live and steal my ideas. Yeah. Anyways, speaking of Money in the Bank, the Money in the Bank pay-per-view is set for July 2nd, I believe it is. If I'm wrong, you can correct me in the comments. That was right? Cool. I have a little birdie over here telling me what's right and wrong. Anyway, it's set for July 2nd. So, that's a Saturday. They got plenty of time to plan and get the things together. Now, one would have to imagine that tonight they're going to do a Money in the Bank announcement. Maybe they will have qualifying matches for Money in the Bank, or just period make announces for Money in the Bank. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But hopefully they start planning for Money in the Bank within the next week or two, because we all want to know who's going to be involved in the Money in the Bank match and who's going to win. At least we're going to place our bets on that. So that's all I got for you. that is the rundown from Monday Night Raw. And hopefully, some of the storylines that I presented get to you, and hopefully, some of them don't. Now, we possibly could see Ezekiel and KO continue their feud as well, but I just forgot all about them, and I do enjoy their feud. I just essentially forgot all about them. But they may make the point to do that on the show tonight. I forgot about Ezekiel and KO. I'm sorry about that because I love both of them. So, with all that being said, I hope you guys enjoy Monday Night Raw, and make sure you guys show up tonight for my after show, which I usually have on Instagram. I'll see you guys.